A man goes to see a doctor and says, "Doctor, I'm depressed. The world is falling to pieces. Everything around us seems to be going wrong." "Well," replies the doctor, "it's perfect that you came today of all days. You see, the great clown Pagliacci is in town tonight. Go and see him. Pagliacci can cheer up anyone, even you." Crestfallen, the man bursts into tears and cries, "But doctor, I am Pagliacci." This legend, in a variety of formulation, goes back to the 19th century, but it's been making the rounds of late. And it does seem especially relevant these days. Many of us are finding it hard to muster good cheer as our world seems to be balancing on the edge of a precipice in an alarming array of domains. Interest rates are sky high. Stock prices have been taking a nosedive. A pandemic has been ravaging a world, and while perhaps it's finally over, perhaps it's not. Changes in climate that were once just long-range predictions are showing troubling indications, both locally and globally, of already being a harsh reality. Democracy, which for decades seemed to be tentatively but inexorably replacing the other worse forms of government in an ever-expanding roster of nations, is seeing a worrying reversal of fortunes, with even some of the oldest democracies among those flirting with or trending towards authoritarianism, isolationism, and even outright fascism. On the European continent, there's a return to war, a return to senseless bloodshed, with ripple effects being felt all over the globe. In Iran, there is a brutal crackdown against brave activists, while the regime in control continues to march toward a nuclear capacity that would enable it to make good on its threats to destroy the one and only Jewish state. In our great country, freedoms that were long protected by law have been eroded or even revoked. Many never imagined that their government might ever again intervene in such private matters. And individuals whose identities and marriages have been affirmed as binding now fear that the rights that they have won at such a cost may have only been but fleeting. And there's the heartbreaking reality of a pandemic of the opioid variety. There's concerns about crime and a heated debate over border policies, all of which are tragically impacting the lives of real people. And our children continue to face drills at school to prepare for yet another mass casualty event, while synagogues and other houses of worship must put on more and more security and must continue to fight against anti-Semitism, bigotry in all its forms. And the list goes on. We can see why in that doctor's office, even the legendary clown Pagliacci might despair. Today, even some of the most upbeat, can-do people might have a hard time keeping positive about the future. As we join together on this first day of the Hebrew month of Tishri to mark Hayom Harat Olam, the birthday of the world, I suspect many of us are challenged to be in the mood for celebration. How can we rejoice for a world that seems to be falling apart? In Mel Brooks' comic horror movie, Young Frankenstein, Gene Wilder's character, Frankenstein, and Marty Feldman's character, Igor, are exhuming a corpse from a cemetery late at night, as one apparently does when attempting to bring back the dead to life. Covered in soil and surrounded by the smell of death, Frankenstein remarks bitterly to Igor that the task they are engaged in is a filthy job. Trying to, as it were, raise his master's spirits, Igor cheerfully points out that it could be worse. It could be raining. And of course, on cue, lightning strikes and it begins to pour. Sometimes recognizing that things could be worse can help put the challenges we face into perspective. Striving to see the glass as half full and taking time to count our blessings are indeed helpful and essential approaches that would receive sanction both by modern psychological research and long-standing Jewish tradition. But when we find ourselves weighed down by the kind and multiplicity of existential issues that are dominating our lived reality, this approach may not be enough. You see, the kind of chronic stress that results from all this trouble can be exhausting. Along with counting our blessings, reframing the problem, remembering that it could be worse, psychological research and Jewish tradition rightly encourage us to be compassionate, to show chesed to those around us, and especially to ourselves. And after extended periods of relative isolation, we know that whether we feel like it or not, more than ever, we need meaningful human connections. As our Torah tells us early in the book of Genesis, we were never meant to dwell alone. To thrive, we need tangible, real-life connections with others with whom we can share life's ups and downs. And science and tradition also encourage us to care for our physical well-being. We all know we ought to be taking time off, getting enough good sleep, eating healthy, spending time in nature, being active, perhaps hardest of all, switching off the devices that feed us endless headlines. And I think we all recognize that sometimes we may need the support of skilled mental health professionals and their expanding toolbox to help lift us up from the darkest of depths. While all of these are essential to combating the mental and spiritual anguish some of us are experiencing at this moment in history, there is another strategy that I believe needs special emphasis. It's an example of the unique wisdom that emerges from our ancient tradition. You see, as we might say in Yiddish, with a nod to the clown Pagliacci, in our more than 3,000-year-old tradition, when it comes to the troubling situation we find our world in right now, nicht unser erster rodeo. This is not our first rodeo, even our first rodeo. Tragically, our people has endured some of the darkest moments in human history. From the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem and exile from our native land of Israel, to centuries of persecution and countless pogroms, to expulsions and attempted genocide. But we have seen empires rise, and we have seen empires fall. And Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish people, is still here to remember them all. Through the centuries, what has been our people's secret weapon? Arguably, that secret weapon, the secret weapon in our spiritual arsenal, has been our people's ability to access deep well springs of hope. Not a kind of Pollyannish hope that imagines a powerful sky daddy coming to rescue us, or a messianic figure arising to save us from the ills of the world, but rather a kind of hope that helps us face difficult and even tragic realities without giving in to despair. The kind of hope that allows us to resist the power of fear, to make us freeze into inaction or flee through denial and the demonization of others, or fawn over those who seek to use our fears to manipulate us in achieving their own ends. Instead, the kind of hope that enables us to march forward, even in the face of hurricane winds that repeatedly lash at us and have done so over the course of history. The kind of hope that inspires us to never give up. The kind of hope that inspires us to action. Because action is the antidote to despair. Rabbi Tarfon, who lived in the land of Israel almost 2,000 years ago during a terrible, tumultuous period following the destruction of the temple, famously taught, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, velo ata ben chorin lehivatel mimena. You're not expected to complete the task, but neither are you free to neglect it. You see, when the challenges we face seem insurmountable, hope can inspire us to act, even when our individual actions alone seem like a mere drop in the ocean towards solving all the problems we see around us. But we know the power of drops of water over time to carve even the hardest stone. Even small actions can help in the urgently needed fight for truth, justice, and the Jewish way. Holocaust survivor, philosopher, and a humanitarian Elie Wiesel said, "Only human beings can move me to despair. but only human beings can remove me from despair. On this birthday of the world, we have good reason to despair, and yet we also have the opportunity to do what our people have done throughout our history, to muster the kind of hope that inspires us to act in ways that not only ward off our despair, but also help fix our broken world. According to tradition, Mechadesh b'chol yom ma'aseh v'reshit, creation is renewed each and every day. There are opportunities for new beginnings, new life, fresh solutions to intractable problems, not just on the birthday of the world, but every single day. We don't need to pretend that everything is okay. We don't need to put on a clown mask and try to be the great Pagliacci. We don't even need a leap of faith. What we need is a leap of hope. A leap of hope that leads us, inspires us to action. Action that little by little moves our world from where it is to where it ought to be. In this new year, may we make many such leaps of hope. And in so doing, may we truly rejoice in our one and our only precious world. Amen.